We're going to quick dive into the topic I had for you folks. That is being able to use Splunk for performance analysis. Now, since we are, a big majority of us here, I imagine, are familiar with LoadRunner, the inner workings of LoadRunner, the controller analysis, and ViewGen, I'm going to focus more on the results piece. So a couple topics I'm going to dive into here are a brief look at Splunk, the way in which performance tests bring data in, looking at the results, and then also dashboarding. Now, I should point out that in the case here, Splunk is a utility that we use at Independent Health. It is not saying that it is the only tool available. This would really be replaceable with, I have my performance data, I want to integrate it with our enterprise log monitoring and analysis, big data, like an Elasticsearch or other things as well. This just happens to be the one here. So what is Splunk? The definition is up on the screen. I'm not a big read the slides type of person, but the one thing I want to focus on is it a way to collect and analyze? Like I said, here this is what we use. It is not the only thing that is available out there. So this is my example that I'm showing, but I'd like to have everyone kind of consider going a little outside of the box of LoadRunner and integrating in with your practices in your company and really show some of the key advantages you can get out of that. So a brief introduction to Splunk itself. So you have a whole bunch of servers. Some of those servers have applications on them, and those applications generate logs. So those might be web, it might be services, it might be a specific WebLogic server that's the back end to some client desktop type server system, a custom thing, really anything, maybe an IoT device. Then let's introduce Splunk. So Splunk is a way to take those logs. In the common case is using an agent that will sit on the server itself, analyze the logs, and ship the logs to Splunk. Other ways that it can happen is if you've integrated your app into Splunk. So option one is I have a server, it has logs. I don't want to or cannot alter the application, so you can put an agent on the server, ship them off. Another option is I am an application owner and I wish to integrate in something with that. You can do real-time posts to Splunk itself. A couple of fast benefits that we get out of this, and these pictures I know aren't super clear. I promise there'll be some better ones shortly. Are the ability to have our application events go into a tool set which has the ability to query and also create all sorts of really nifty dashboards. These slides will be available after the fact as well as the video. So I want to put up a couple of helpful links that I found, such as overall documentation, what can Splunk monitor, what do you want to do, different sources, how to create charts. They really have a great library out there. So from performance, what do we do for performance here? We do project-specific performance requests, so integrating with the project to ensure that the project meets their SLAs, can handle the appropriate load expected, etc. We do also daily test runs in our one main test environment that mimics production. And in our tests, whether they're project-specific or specifically the dailies, we test a handful of applications, and in that suite of application tests, we have dozens and dozens of tests and results to manage. And one thing that we don't like to deal with is we don't like to deal with Excel reports. They kind of get muddled, they kind of get messy, and let's face it, the audiences we go to don't necessarily have the analysis tool available to them to get all those charts, and some of those charts can be cumbersome. They can't integrate in with your applications and such. So we want to nix that. That's the reasoning that we went this route. So I want to show you how Splunk fits into our landscape. So we showed this picture before of our servers sending data to Splunk, and where does LoadRunner fit into that? So you have LoadRunner. With LoadRunner, you have a controller. You have analysis. Analysis has a database associated with it where all the results go. So we've tapped into that, and we've created a log file out of the database. I'll show you how that works in a moment. And then we ship that log file to Splunk with an agent. This isn't saying that LoadRunner is the one and only tool that can do this. This is just the example using, if you had a mixed mode environment where you had a couple of other tools running along with LoadRunner, they could all do the same thing. This is another really great reason that you might want to use a tool like this, because you can integrate different tool sets worth of results into one place. So being able to make the logs from LoadRunner Go, we have to configure LoadRunner, the analysis tool, to use SQLite as a database. That's not the default, but it is easy to change. You have to create a default template for analysis, and then you have to set up the controller to auto-correlate your results. From an execution standpoint, we run the controller via a batch, using the command line options. We invoke SQLite, and we create a log file, and that log file is written into a location where our Splunk agent consumes that data. So real quick, from a tools perspective, we use SQLite in the analysis tools option, and under analysis tools and template, we create a default template. I think all you have to do is just go there and click default template. Not going to read all these batch files, but just to give an idea, full transparency in what we're doing. Here's an example of the batch file that we use to kick things off, which shows some of the options after the fact for doing the auto analysis, for running the test, and then kicking off SQLite. I should mention it also requires having SQLite installed on the machine, but I do not believe that is of any cost. The SQLite batch file itself for getting the data into the particular format. And then the lovely query itself, which I'm sure you can barely read even in full screen mode. If anybody wants some details on this, they can feel free to reach out to me later. No real secrets in here, just a matter of formulating our results in the way that we wish to see them. And this is an example of the log file, but don't worry about reading this. I have for you here, digging into the data itself. So for the data, we need to have our scenario and script information, including any transactions and sub-transactions, our timing statuses, because those are, of course, important to us, and any other metadata that we wish to bring along for analysis. So what that might look like here is we have a timestamp so that we can have things in a trending fashion, what our application name is, the environment name, script, transaction name, and a lot of this detail should look rather familiar to you if you're used to looking at the raw data that's involved from the results of a performance test in LoadRunner. And here's an example of it in Splunk itself, broken down. So a couple prereqs before we look at a demo of seeing our data in Splunk. These are things that we thought of, some in the beginning, some lessons learned, so I figured I'd share them with you. So again, in this example, this is just what we chose. It's already the enterprise tool that we had in available to us. As you look through the demo, you might say, hey, we have a tool like that. Doesn't mean you couldn't use another tool. You should have some kind of an idea of what kind of amount of data you're going to be sending off, because that's going to help you set up the necessary index and sources in Splunk so that it can consume your data. Splunk specific will auto roll off data outside of the size. So if you allocate 500 meg of space to your index, it keeps the most current 500 megs. So just a thought there. And then really think through what you want your data to look like, because it's more important to take the time and think about it before you get the data there, to realize that at some point in time you have data that's no longer useful to you. You want to make sure you get all those thoughts up front. Quite handy. So let's take a moment and look at Splunk. I've prepared a video for you, and let's check it out. So here is Splunk. It is a web accessible application. And the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to show you a really important page that was helpful to me. I didn't really understand how to query Splunk in the beginning, but they have this great article out there. So if Splunk is something you have or consider using, this is a great article to take already SQL skills that you probably have and to translate them over to, well, what does that mean in Splunk? I want to look for my data, but I don't know how to tell Splunk to do that. This was a really great article that helped me out. And as you can see, there's all kinds of different commands in here that you're used to from querying. So we set up our index. First thing I'm going to do is choose a date for, say, last Friday, just because I want to keep the results set small so that we can focus on what it's doing and not get overwhelmed with an immense amount of data. So I'm going to look at a 1-hour test that ran last Friday. And I'm going to go in and type in our source type. So we have a source type of LoadRunner. This allows us to key in on all the data that we have contributed for performance testing. So it's going to run the search based on that time frame. And here are all the different events. An event is just an entry in the log. And if we take a look at one of these, we can see all the different data elements that we talked about earlier on that were contributed into Splunk. So we have our application name, transaction name, different transaction data pieces such as the status, the amount of time it took for our response data, the start time and end time. And those are all fantastic pieces of data because we can correlate those not only with LoadRunner data, but also with other application logs that are coming to this system. So we can continue to drill into here. So I'm going to take the web, for example, and just drill into the web. And as I click and interact with Splunk, it will continue to mature my query for the use of our analysis that we're doing. And we can see that it's breaking things down for the web. Now I want to take for a moment and I want to do some actual analysis of the data. So if you had this raw data in Excel, you'd probably want to calculate some averages across a particular time. So we're going to do just that here. So we're going to look at the average response time for our web application. And it's going to run, it's going to calculate from all the events that happened during that time and date range. And it's going to give us an answer. Now this answer is actually across the entire application, which may not be that useful to us, so we can keep narrowing this down a little bit more. So I'm going to tell it to do it by our script. And if we do it by the script, you're going to see all the individual scripts and the response times. And what's nice is this is like throwing all of your response data into a database that you can easily query. So another statistic we might want is we might want to know what our peaks were for each script. So we're going to run those, see what our peaks were, and we can see all the averages and peaks. And there's probably countless calculations that you could do. Now what we can do with this that we can't do with traditional databases, I can do some visualization. And let's face it, a picture tells a far better story to our individuals that we're working with, whether it be the business or other technical folk. It's a lot easier to get some details out of it. We can look at things in a variety of different standard formats, bar charts, line graphs. If a pie chart was acceptable, that would be available as well. And I can also take and maybe split out a chart, just some really handy things that you can do with a tool like this, because it may be beneficial to you to make it so you can call out our peaks and valleys a little bit better. So here I'm going to split it off so that we can see on a separate access our max response times. And now notice that our averages don't get lost if there's any tremendous peaks. You know, we want to be able to produce what is the best picture available for us. Another thing that we can do with this here, just a moment. Oh, I forgot to mention that you can also see the data below, so you get the raw data available with your charts as well. Another thing we might want to do is we might want to look at some trending data as well. So I'm going to just key in on one transaction itself, and we can see all the events for that transaction easily brought through. Let's look at some trending data doing a time chart. A time chart is the ability to take all the events and chart them based on whatever span we want. Here I think it auto defaults to about a minute. So you can do it by day, by week, by month, depending on what your date range is as well. And as I I said, this is just a really great way for us to be able to quickly get in and look at data. So I'm going to go and select all of last week, and we can see it all charted out. And here it defaults to a day. And let's change that a little bit, and let's add in some peaks as well. So we can see across the day, every day last week, what our different peaks were. So we can show that as well, and just really paint a really clear picture as to what's there. Now, if we want these pictures to be reusable, we can create dashboards within Splunk that allow us to reuse that data itself. And in essence of time, I'm just going to show the dashboard, and you can do all kinds of really fun tricks and techniques with it. You can add time pickers, you can add other types of things. So note here that we could add time pickers and other things to make it so there's an interactive chart. So you actually can make a self-service, I guess you could say, portal for your consumers or for yourself to use in order to create really great visuals for folks. So I'm going to show a couple of dashboards just to give an idea of what we can do. We can do really great trending. So I think this is a 6-month view. I really don't, unfortunately, won't be able to see there, but I believe this is like a 3 or 6 month view of our averages in the blue, our peaks in the yellow, and my gosh, I don't remember. I think there's a standard deviation in the red. I should have made that a little clearer. I apologize. You can do all kinds of trending with it, a lot of real-time data. We can do some comparisons. So this chart on the left here is a before and after. So maybe before a particular release and after the release where a change is made to the environment, and you can do trending that way. You can do volume and response comparisons. So you can compare your production and your pre-production to understand how close you're representing and simulating your traffic. If you don't have, key requirements, or maybe you want to double check your requirements. They told us we're only expecting 1,000 users a day. Production shows 5,000 users. You can do a lot of really great comparisons there. And what's great is we're able to combine the performance data as well as the really any data that's in your system in one environment. Here's a really great one that I like to look at, and that's the ability to take and chart out your sub-transactions. So the charts in the blue in the first row across is going to be the overall response times, and then the charts below are going to be then broken down into individual pieces and components.